Good afternoon. My name is Jimmy Comer. I am co-owner of RBI Services. We are located in Ashland. This is my business partner, Tracie Spencer.
Hi, guys.
And they asked us to come out today and speak about insurance, because that's always an exciting topic. It's especially exciting when you have 200 people show up in the middle of the woods where Montpelier meets Ashland and a tropical storm's coming at you. So that's always a lot of fun. But we are the insurance agent for Wings of Hope. We also do some bookkeeping. We can do tax and we do payroll for them as well. So we don't allow the third business partner out for a reason, because we don't know what he's going to say. So RBI Services was started back in 2018 to help the small business community with the headaches, as I mentioned, insurance, accounting, payroll, and taxes. But my niche has been with nonprofits for 10 plus years now. As I tell people, I have 2 degrees in history. I'm a sucker for a good story, and every one of you guys have a good story as to why you got started. So Tracie always holds her breath when I go out to meet with a nonprofit, because she doesn't know how long I'm going to be out there asking questions. But Allison asked us to speak to you about insurance. And I know it's like, but hopefully we have an example too that we can help you. But you'll notice I gave you a handout that this is for you to carry home. It's 6-7 pages. There's a lot of information, but our business card's also there. So we will have an open floor session of ask your questions. We will answer them. But there's also contact information on how to get back with us afterward, because you will never think of your question until Tuesday morning going, I wish. But we are wide open to helping folks, no matter where you're at. So what you'll see here real quick, one of the things, nonprofits, as I said, I've been writing insurance for them for 10 years. And I'm not saying you guys, but sometimes nonprofits think, nobody's going to do anything to me. I'm doing good in the community. And it's like, no. A nonprofit has to be run like a small business. You've got to protect yourself. Unfortunately, things happen, and people will still hold your organization responsible. So that's how you have to think of this as being a small business owner. And where I'll begin with is directors and officers coverage. Now, what amazes me is I will talk to nonprofits here. We are located here in Ashland. So I'll talk to nonprofits in Virginia, and I'll go, directors and officers, and they go, yes, we have some. I went, that's great, but do you have coverage for it? And you would be amazed how many times I'm told for organizations that are 10, 15 years old, they do not have it. And so the first thing I'll tell them is, does anybody on your board have a beach house? Because inevitably somebody owns a beach house. I'm like, do they like that beach house? Because if something goes sideways, your board is a separate entity from the organization. They need to be covered. So that is how we get the thought started. What's that?
Why is the board a separate entity from the organization?
That's a good question. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure why it made the IRS create it like that.
Is that the IRS? Is it the state of Virginia?
No, this is all the way across the nation. That's why I would go IRS. But the board also oversees the organization. So I've been chair for multiple boards, and one of the things, the closest I ever had to worry about putting my D&O on notice was I had to let a executive director go. And you never know how that person's going to react. Now, we had everything documented as to why we were doing it, but that still doesn't mean that executive director was not going to come back and go, you let me go because of my age, because of whatever you want to say. We had everything lined up, and the way I let her go, I actually had we had a personal relationship also, and I told her, I said, this isn't where you're meant to be. You're more actually want to help people. So I encouraged her to go that way, and she's now actually a pretty successful advisor with another nonprofit here in town, and she's thriving. But so that was, I kind of de-escalated, but I still kind of held my breath because I didn't know how she was going to take it. So that's, again, the board and the nonprofit, when I tell people, you know, how's a nonprofit set up? I go back to the 80s, and I always say I'm Tip O'Neill and the executive director is Ronald Reagan, and everybody thinks Reagan had the power, and it was actually Tip O'Neill and the Congress had the power. So that's how it's set up. Hopefully executive director and chair have a good relationship, that things work out, that's understood, but you never know. But yeah, a board can be held responsible for things that potentially go sideways. Lawyers will go after any dollar they think they can smell. And if there are any lawyers, any family members, I apologize, but lawyers and insurance do this fun little dance with each other. So,
but also think of your boards. I mean, nonprofits, you're not here to make money. You're here to help the clients, but who has money? Who's the ones that typically they're going to go after? It's probably going to be the people on your board, the people that are advising, things like that. And that's kind of why they have it separate, because yes, your nonprofit is going to have its own insurance to protect it, but I mean, the people that you want on your board are going to be the, you know, the head honchos of some big corporation, getting advice, things like that. That's when people start doing the digging, that's what they're going to go after. They're going to go after the money, not necessarily the nonprofit, but more, if I'm going to sue somebody, who am I going to go after? I mean, unfortunately, that's, you know.
You can't stop people from suing you.
Yeah, and that's part of the reason why it's separate, because you don't know who's going to be on your board in the future, so it kind of protects. It's a separate entity to protect.
and that's going to be a common theme you hear throughout our presentation today, that insurance does more than cover the damages. It covers legal fees as well. So usually when we write policies, we will write it having legal fees outside the liability limits. So say you have $1 million of liability limit, we want legal fees outside that just in case something bad does happen, because the last thing we want is $250,000 of legal fees come out of that million and you're held responsible for $900,000. All of a sudden the nonprofit's got to come up with that extra $150,000. It doesn't really cost that much more to do that, but it's better protected than nonprofit. So I'll let Tracie move on to general liability, and then I know we have some folks that just came in, so I'm gonna hand out some notes so you all see everything that we're talking about.
All right, so the next piece is the general liability, which is gonna be basically protecting, we're going back to the nonprofit now, away from the board, just your nonprofit in general. General liability is gonna protect the organization from accusations that someone suffered bodily injury, property damage, any type of personal injury that's gonna be on your property, the operations, or even your products, what you're doing. I mean, just think of, you know, we did come out here on Monday to do a risk assessment before this happened for you guys to make sure everything's good to go, that Wings of Hope had this set up perfectly, that there was nothing that we could see as insurance agents that could possibly, you know, anybody could get hurt while you guys were on the property. I mean, that type situation. So usually with general liability, you'll find several pieces within the general liability. You'll have the general liability. You could also have professional. The other biggest piece, especially with nonprofits, anybody that's working with kids, especially, is the abuse and molestation. I'm sure you guys, if you do work with youth, probably have things in place, have policies and procedures as far as you never want to have, you know, a youth and one adult together at the same time by themselves, just to protect the youth, protect the adult as well. So that's what comes in place, a lot of the lines with the general liability. Just having that extra coverage for the sexual abuse, molestation, kids going home accusing the nonprofit of doing something because it was one-on-one with an adult versus a kid, things like that. So normally, no matter what, any nonprofit's going to have. Some of this insurance we're going to go over kind of depends on if your nonprofit needs it or not. General liability, everyone will have, no matter what, just to protect the property, protect the nonprofit. Volunteers also will fall into, with a nonprofit, they may also fall into the liability piece, that they may be covered under your liability because they are volunteers, they're not actually a paid employee. We can get into the paid employees in a second, but that's kind of where the general liability falls. Professional is going to be also included with the general liability. That also is going to depend on what you're doing for your nonprofit. The professional may be, go ahead.
I do not want to sidetrack your presentation, but I've got like all these questions.
Sure.
Can you explain what a little bit better, like what general liability covers? Because also being like a horse property or a farm, there is some protection, right, from at least risks involved with farm animals and stuff like that. So where does that protection come into play versus what having general liability insurance?
So the general liability,
I know there's more to it.
for instance, for Wings of Hope, like I said, Jimmy came out here beginning of the week to make sure things, this is going to be tropical storms, perfect example. You guys are on this property. Well, let's make sure there's no holes in the parking lot that somebody's going to fall and twist an ankle, things like that. Or protecting the property to make sure everything's good to go. Even tripping over a rug at the front door.
Covered as being a part of.
That's where your general liability is going to get picked up.
So the fact that this is a farm, what is it called? That, you know, there's the sign everywhere that you basically.
Agricultural risk.
Yes.
So
Does
that-
not help you?
That's more state of Virginia code. Are you from Virginia?
Yes.
Yeah, so that'll be a state of Virginia code. If you go to like wineries, you will see this is a agricultural risk. And that's because the insurance is written on a more of the agricultural type product. But it's also just, that's the state wanting to classify it.
That
for
doesn't
that
protect us though from people suing us from somebody tripping on a wire while they're here.
No. You know, a horse kicks you. I don't know if you got the email Friday. Julia sent something out, but the second paragraph said, please take Route 33 to Route 54 or Route 54 to Tower Road. Stay off Scotchtown Road and Horseshoe Bridge Road. That was because their insurance agent was going, keep people off those little skinny roads. Maybe one insurance agent went down Scotchtown yesterday.
I'm the insurance agent. I knew it was okay.
Yeah, but she
And
saw,
I did Horseshoe Bridge today.
but
so
she saw that trees had fallen.
There's a tree on 686, is that horseshoe or the bridge one?
Was there?
That was Scotchtown, I think.
I didn't listen to the
Yeah.
But that's just, you know, that's where you want to be taking precautions. You never know.
Someone's gonna sue you over a road that they took to get here?
Doesn't mean lawyers won't. And again, I'm not trying to bash lawyers, but if a lawyer can smell, so, you know, somebody hits a tree, goes into a ditch and passes, they were coming here, doesn't mean somebody may not say, well, Wings of Hope should have warned us, because that was one of two paths into the, to the range.
Wow, that seems frivolous, right? That doesn't seem, but that.
But
They can sue you for
breathing.
not telling you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
That doesn't mean they'll win.
yeah,
But they can bring the
Yeah.
suit.
yep.
Yeah.
Anything if you really wanted to try.
Yeah, and it's an unfortunate, and we've watched, like I said, we opened January of 18, and we've just seen society get more and more litigious as we go.
So it seems like one of your benefits is you see things that we don't necessarily see, right?
Oh, yeah.
You are
Yeah.
aware of risks that we, like, that would never occur to me. That's something
Yeah.
I should be worried about.
So I'll give you this, so as Tracy said, Monday I came out here, and I looked at Alice and I said, you know there's a chance of rain Saturday. She went, no, it's not. Well, I had already seen a weather forecast saying a coastal low might develop, and so she pulled her phone out, she went, no, this says 50% chance of rain. I went, well, at that time it was just rain, but as the week went on, they kept going, this might develop into something more, which was my fear, because I know how hot the Atlantic is right now, and it did. It turned into I saw that it turned into a Cat 1 hurricane for like, I think 5 hot minutes, but it was rain and wind. Now, as far as, I mean, you're from Virginia, this is definitely not the worst we've ever seen, but it still doesn't make me go, eh. So, trees falling, that kind of stuff. But you're around livestock. So I remember yesterday, one of the horses with the blinders on, they were clearing the hallway because the horse was skittish. The horse kicked somebody, that's liability.
But I can tell you as of Monday, the way you guys have done this Friday night, Saturday, and Sunday was not the way it was planned at all. I mean, they had a lot more outside. I mean, the vendors were never supposed to be in with the horses. I mean, it was set up completely different to have a lot more space. And I mean, they made it work. But that was kind of the liability piece is, okay, let's reworking everything because we didn't want a liability claim of somebody possibly getting hurt or something happening because of the storm coming in. So that's kind of what your liability picks up.
So while this might be conservative, on a farm, that's more of a state thing. You still need liability. Equipment's always running here. Tracie can tell you about, it was a snowplow that did it, but a woman walked out in front of a snowplow, killed her, ended up being over $1 million settlement.
It was, and he was just in a parking lot. He wasn't even plowing.
Yeah.
He was literally in the parking lot going to meet his boss for lunch.
And the woman stepped out in front of him.
And stepped out in front of him and killed him. And the liability was, that's what picks up things like that. So it's, and it is unforeseen things that you possibly don't even think about.
I just didn't realize the Virginia inherent risk farm thing. I thought there was more protection.
Yeah. They, but they want the warnings of, you know, we do everything we can to help Allison make sure everything is safe. So if it's something silly, we can go, come on. But it still doesn't mean somebody won't try, unfortunately. So,
Oh, no, no problem. Please ask questions. So the professional also kind of falls under the liability. I did go into that. The professional is going to vary based on the nonprofit. The professional here is going to be more along the lines of the horses and what they're doing with the horses and the equine therapy, as opposed to another nonprofit working with at-risk kids, maybe just whatever, counseling, things like that, coaching. You're counseling or coaching those children, that's your professional. So the nonprofits need professional, but it is going to vary based on what type of professional you have based on your nonprofit. You want the next one?
Oh, you got that one.
The next one that we're going to go into, like I said, the volunteers. If you have volunteers working for your nonprofit, more than likely they'll fall under general liability, as far as if they get hurt, things like that. The next piece that we're going to go into also will pick up your volunteers on one piece of it, as well as the employees. So work comp, state of Virginia is completely different than any other state. What I'm going to first warn you before we talk about work comp is make sure you know your state laws. And it doesn't matter if you're a nonprofit, it doesn't matter what type of business you are. For instance, in the state of Virginia, if you have 3 employees, that can include 2 owners. So if it's just Jimmy and myself, and we have one other employee, even if Jimmy and I don't want to be covered, you have to have work comp in the state of Virginia. So the first thing I'm going to warn you is just please make sure you check your laws in your state, because I know there's several different states here, making sure you know. Because if you could have one employee that you think you don't have to be covered because they don't want to be covered under work comp policy, they don't want to get, if they get hurt, they're going to turn it into their health insurance, no big deal, but your state may come after you based on the laws. So just check with that. So that's the first thing I'm going to say, but yeah, you just need to make sure what the laws are for your state. But the work comp, what it's going to do is that is going to protect you if your employees get hurt. You have some coverage that they can go to the doctor, they can get taken care of, things like that. The work comp policy will also pick up if you have to all of a sudden change course because you're working with, that employee's working with the horses, their foot gets stepped on, they're now in a cast, they can't work with the horses anymore. It also will allow you, and it helps you to maybe pay because they are not able to do their own job, but they can come back to work and do like a lighter load, things like that. That's where your work comp policy comes in to just cover you. The volunteers also, though, can be covered under what's called the accident policy. Any type of coverage, for instance, Wings of Hope has an accident policy, especially with the kids working on the farm here and on the ranch, and then the volunteers. So if the kids get hurt, then they do have coverage through an accident policy that they can cover for the kids. So just because they sign a waiver saying they're allowed to be here, they also did put an accident policy in place to help for the kids. The volunteers may also, depending on the carriers, the volunteers may also fall under that window. So if a volunteer gets hurt, they may also have coverage, not only with the general liability, but they may have coverage through the accident policy as well.
Did you talk about the abuse?
Yeah,
Abuse, molestation?
I did some.
Okay. All right, just making sure. Because that's never a fun,
No.
But going back to abuse and molestation, again, it just takes, especially if you work with kids and if you work with troubled youth.
Takes the pressure
I'm
off.
going to give you another example of that nonprofit I told you we had to let the executive director go. My very first meeting, it was brought to my attention, very first meeting that I was chair, they had an Easter egg hunt. Things went sideways to the point a kid threw a rock at his father. The father left the child there, and one of the board members put the child in their car to carry them home 20 miles away. Apparently, the child's mother came out screaming because mom and dad don't have a good relationship. Mom came out screaming at the kid, and the child went, well, she brought me home. Well, who's this? And that easily could have gone sideways because they said mom was just ripping into the kid. So the best way to get a kid to stop, she touched me. And that's all it takes is an accusation. So I don't believe anybody here will do anything. This is more to protect you from a child going, they carried me behind the barn or whatever, and nothing happened, but there will be an investigation, and it will take money to get your name cleared. Again, this is always the darkest subject. I hate talking about it, but it's also one that happens way too frequently. So that's something to always keep in mind, especially if you're working with kids. Have also very good, strong policies. You guys know Allison, and I hope y'all reach out to Allison. Allison's a huge resource for you guys. And they have policies written in place for here. And I have no doubt Allison would be more than happy to share if you don't have something already in place.
How do you scope the degree into the amount of coverage, dollar coverage for all these?
A little bit is better than nothing, but typically we like to start at $1 million. Kind of match the general liability, so if you have $1 million liability, and there are carriers that may not give you that much, but especially if you're working with youth, they really don't. If you put the procedures in place, for instance, I'd mentioned it, you're working with youth, you always have 2 adults, always. You know, even if the 2 adults aren't working specifically with the kid in this room, you may have 20 kids, but you have 4 adults. So I can see what's going on in that group over there. If you have policies and procedures in place, none of these carriers are going to have a problem with giving you $1 million. But I mean, rule of thumb is a little bit's better than nothing.
I mean, we have some that go as low as 50,000. Our rule of RBI is, we're here to advise you. You're going to have to do what helps you sleep at night. And that goes for both sides. So what helps me sleep at night is if I tell you how I would write this, but you know your organization better than I do as far as finances and your procedures. And I sit there and go, okay, it's going to cost this much, and you're like, yeah, if it's going to help you sleep better at night to go with this level of coverage, that's a decision you got to make. But your agent should always be showing you how it should be written. And I get it, there's financial constraints. It's not going to get any easier over the next 12 to 24 months. I mean, I'm sure if you're already starting to feel it a little bit. I refer to it as the restaurant economy. We've been watching restaurants around us all of a sudden struggle for the last 6 months. And so we're starting to see it come through. So, but don't go without is also the thing we would talk about. Next thing we'll talk about, and this is kind of easy, it is what it says, property insurance. So that Kubota out there, trailers, things that are used to keep your farm running. Don't forget about that. Something happens, a fire occurs. A tornado drops out of the sky, wind blows the building, it damages, start adding it up. I mean, some of the stuff that's also included in the property would be the refrigerator, computers, I think the feed.
It can be, yes.
Yeah, so your feed, so think about feed, especially with winter coming on, prices start doing this, something happens, it all will cost money to get you back up and running. So that's, again, you take a look at it, work with your agent, and go, this is what it's worth, and then Just take it from there.
Well, and you can think about it too, especially, for instance, not necessarily Wings of Hope, but I have a couple other equine therapies that we've quoted or written that they're like, well, we don't have any coverage, we don't want coverage. But think about the fact, because everything was donated. So they're looking at the fact that the helmets, they have a whole section of boots for the kids to use, all different sizes, the gear, the tack for the horses. They're like, well, we didn't buy it. It was all donated. Well, that's great. But in the event of a loss, think about the fact that you're going to have to get that stuff again. You can't necessarily guarantee that somebody's going to be able to donate it again. So think about that. Yes, it's donated to you and it's great. You didn't have to pay for it to begin with, but you're still going to want some type of coverage on it, even if it's not full amount, to get you back to where you're doing. And that's part of the property coverage. So just make sure you think about that when you're talking to your agent, that yes, all of this was donated, all this property was donated, that you didn't have to do anything. I mean, even this building for Wings of Hope, there was a whole lot that was donated. So did they pay for this building? No, because they've had contractors come in and donate it. But yet this building does have to be covered to value, because in the event of a loss, it's now on them. So just kind of keep that in mind too with the property coverage. Is yes, this may be a piece that you can save some money, because you might not be able to, you can look at the fact that this was donated, but just keep in mind, in the event of a loss, it's going to have to be replaced.
So if you just do kind of a general, think about doing a blanket property. If you don't insure everything, at least do a blanket, because then if a complete disaster happens, you can go, well, I need that Kubota more than I need that trailer. So you can get the Kubota at least replaced. So that's just, again, something to kind of keep in mind. And again, I know it sounds like doom and gloom. It's just put the stuff in your head, because you don't deal with it on a day-to-day. And yeah, like I said, I've been watching the weather system since Monday. So, do you want?
The next piece is auto coverage. This may or not apply to you guys. For instance, if you want to look at Wings of Hope again, there's a truck to pull the horse trailer. That type of stuff's going to be covered on an auto policy. But also think about, you have what's called hired and non-owned coverage. So if you have, especially if it's more of a clerical risk, you know, maybe you have an office manager that doesn't do a whole lot with the horses and the ranch, things like that, but that person is constantly going to the store to run errands, to get you stuff, to go to the bank. You'll need what's called hired and non-owned coverage for that person. So basically what happens is that person gets into a car accident, their insurance will pick up, but you have some coverage for them because they were driving for your business. So auto coverage, like I said, may or may not apply, but always just keep that in mind with who's driving, what are they doing. You may not necessarily have a vehicle, a trailer, things like that that are in the name of the business, but if you still have executive directors that are employees, things like that, that are driving, you know, even outside sales, they're going fundraising, they're going to try to get the money in for the company, things like that, you want to always think about the auto piece.
What was that policy called?
It's called hired and non-owned. And believe it or not,
Hired and not owned?
Hired
and non.
and non-owned.
Yep.
So you don't own a vehicle,
You don't own
but
that
you're
particular vehicle.
you don't own that particular vehicle, but in a way you're still responsible. And it's kind of coverage for your employees. It makes your employees feel better that they're driving their own vehicle, that if something happens, you do have something to help them out on there.
This weekend's a great example. I know Allison's had people going either Montpelier or Ashland. Wings of Hope did not own the vehicles where they were going out to pick something up, but that's where that coverage would come in case something big goes.
Does the person have to be an employee, or can they be like a volunteer?
It can be a volunteer
as
too.
well. Yep.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yep.
Yep, it can be a volunteer as well.
So the next one I'll talk about a little bit, because this is the newest type of coverage, and every nonprofit goes, I don't need it. I don't need it. And that's cyber liability. And if you watch the news right now, cybercrime is quickly picking up. I call it the new Jesse Jameses of the world. These folks sit in the basement and they will sit there, and some of them do it just for fun, and some of them do it, this is their living. They will hold your computer, your information ransom. They'll put a $25,000 ransom to unlock it. These policies typically start around $600 to $800, but here's why it's important. Somebody gets in there, your information. One, if you got any kind of medical records, HIPAA, that's not gonna be a good thing, especially if they blast that out onto the internet. If you take any kind of payments and you keep those records, if you've got socials of any kind, you keep more data than you probably realize. And that's something to think on. So cyber coverage will help, one, get your system unlocked, but it will also, if it's bad enough and the media picks up on it, they will have a team to be your press agent to downplay it. Because the last thing you want is your organization to be remembered as, oh, they're the ones who allowed everybody's personal information to get out. I have one nonprofit that did not have cyber, and somebody in China rearranged her Facebook page into Mandarin Chinese and then locked it. That basically, she had somebody on her board who used to actually work for NASA on the black web. So he was smarter than they were, but he spent about 36 hours untangling everything. If that happens to you, I can't necessarily say my friend will be able to get you taken care of. So think about 36 hours of your web page, how much that's gonna cost. So that's the kind of stuff also.
And even, I mean, I get them all the time from medical offices. You get the letter in the mail saying there was a data breach, things like that. That's what this coverage pays for. So in the event something happens, those letters that everybody receives saying, hey, I'm sorry, we had a data breach, we can help you out, we can pay for your,
A year
the year of credit, whatever, that's kind of also what this coverage is for, not just to unlock you and get you back, but the media presence or, helping you with, now you have to explain to all of your clients that their stuff may be floating around out there somewhere. So that's kind of what that coverage is for as well. The last big piece that we want to talk about is employee dishonesty. This may or may not apply, again, to your nonprofit. This will only be for employees. Volunteers usually do not fall under this. But employee dishonesty is if you have employees that end up stealing from you, whether it's actual stock, things like that, merchandise, or if it's even money, that's where this coverage takes place. Is it covers the crime, it protects your organization through the reimbursement of an unfortunate case that you do find out that you had an employee that was stealing from you.
So the last page, this is just things to keep in mind. Tips to remember. Number one, don't wait to set up your insurance plan. And let me give you an example. Back late May, we get a phone call from an animal shelter here in town, one of the 5 largest. Their insurance was being canceled on July 1st. They waited till the end of May to go, hey, it was being canceled because they had a $150,000 claim. And the thing is, I told them 3 years ago who they were with does not cover nonprofits. They do not know what they're on. And sure enough, as soon as they had that claim, that company who they've been with for 20 years went, whoop. So all of a sudden we're scrambling and we were struggling to get coverage. People were turning them down for that $150,000 claim, and what do they have in place? They were told, I think, in April, give your insurance agent a lot of time. One of the biggest things that drives us nuts is that little lizard. Give us 15 minutes, we'll save you 15%. That's not how most insurance
How
works.
long does it take usually from end to end to start?
If it's something easy, simple,
Well, if you're starting a nonprofit
starting
with
enough.
animals and kind of like Wings of Hope, but not this enormous, what's your end-to-end timeline?
Give 30 at least.
30 days?
I mean, because if you're fresh,
At the minimum.
yeah, give us 30. We are working, we have somehow become known. I mean, all of a sudden we're having all these equine therapy groups call us. So I am trying to put together a program that is built for y'all to make it quicker, easier.
But also, if you're a startup especially, for instance, let's take Wings of Hope for example. So let's say they had this building, but they're not quite ready yet. They're still working on their certifications. So they may have a couple horses here, but they're not seeing youth, seeing clients yet. That doesn't mean you don't have to get your insurance. So especially if you're working on step by step, it can be covered in pieces. Yeah. So, I mean, we do have clients, you know, that are working on this that maybe it's on their personal property. So we've written a farm policy. So let's get the farm covered. Let's get the property coverage.
The next question is that you live on your land.
Yes. So get to your insurance person because, yes, you're going to want to make sure it's set up correctly now. Yep. Not just a homeowner's policy, but I'm going to want to write you on a farm policy that's going to cover your house. It's going to cover your individual buildings. It'll give you coverage for the horses. But then once you're ready to get your nonprofit up and running, that carrier's already, I mean, I have clients that we've just done this for. We got the farm in place. So everything's covered. The horses are covered, the tax covered, everything. And then they're ready to go for the nonprofit. Then you write the nonprofit piece that's going to cover what the nonprofit does. So always, like I said, just do step by step. You got a question?
Yeah.
You got a question?
Yeah, no, it's,
yes.
That's, the more time you give an insurance specialty, you guys have a couple of things going against you. Nonprofits, not every company writes. You might get a pretty piece of paper. There's one certain equine company out there that we run across all the time, and they don't cover riding. And when we show them the nonprofit contract, their jaws drop. It's
I mean, it's cute when it says equine liability. You'd think that's what's covering. Doesn't cover riding, doesn't cover trail rides. So just be careful to what you're looking at. You had a question?
Yes. Do you have to have like a different type of coverage if you, like I know some insurances won't cover where they want the horses to be all bomb-proof, but if you're also, not only are you doing the equine therapy part, but you're rescuing and training horses that have been abused and they're on the same property, is that an issue with insurance?
That's something you have to talk with your agent about, and then the agent starts working with the company to make sure the company understands exactly what's going on.
Okay.
Now, the more you have going on, the harder it is for us to get covered.
Right.
We have a farm right now, and this is a farm, it's not a nonprofit. They're in Suffolk, they're brand new. They do transport, they sell raw goat milk.
They're doing canning, they're doing classes. I mean,
Yeah.
they're just trying to make money at this point, get up and running. So they've got their hands in everything, trying to see what's going to stick.
Yeah.
And the carriers are like, this is too much. Like, they're not writing it for one piece. So yes, I mean, especially if you're already up and running and you want to add a piece, my suggestion is get to your insurance agent first and go, hey, this policy we got that's good to go from what I'm doing. Let's see if I were to go this direction and add this piece. But there are a lot of carriers that I know of because of what you guys do with the rescue and there are carriers that will do it.
Yeah.
Two questions. Who underwrites your policies?
We have several. For horse, for equine therapy, for the nonprofit piece itself, it's a group called the Nonprofit Insurance Alliance. But the alliance will not cover like the barn. And they won't cover the horses. So we then will have other companies that will take on those pieces. So for example, Nonprofit Alliance covers Allison's program, but this building's covered by a company called Goodwill Mutual. They do farm stuff. We have, can't remember where the equipment is.
Goodwill. It's the same
Is
as
it
the bed.
Goodwill?
It's the same as the building.
So we have several, you have to pull it together, but that's why I'm saying give us time because not every company's going to want to do everything.
I think there's,
The scenario,
okay.
hopefully this doesn't happen to any of us, but it's a viable possibility. Let's say a horse, someone leaves a gate open, horse goes out the driveway, under the road, car hits it, and there's a fatality. What part of our insurance covers that?
That would be the liability, general liability.
The liability to pick it up. And that is as long as your insurance policy, and Wings of Hope does have that, but as long as your insurance policy has that clause in there that the horses are included, that the horses can cause that, but liability will generally pick it up as long as your policy is written correctly. I know we're running out of time. We got 2 more questions.
Just a quick one. If I have a business on my property that's revenue producing and then I have a nonprofit, is that required?
Your session is so,
More than likely, yes. You can come talk to us and find out.
the next session is getting ready to start.
Yep.
But you guys,
If you have a question, come talk to us separately because
we'll
we're
step out
gonna
the
step
hallway.
right out.
you know, what, you guys want to,